let's imagine you have a situation like this. So here you are, once again, you exist in the world, and you find yourself in these circumstances, and you're in front of a precipice, a fairly steep one so far as I can tell. This is you over here, the feet, this is you, right? This is the meat that you control. It's called your body. There's one little chunk of meat, about maybe 70, 80 kilos, 60 kilos, depending, and you get to control it, and that's called your body. And that's where, you get to decide if it goes, up, down, left, right, stays put, or whatever. In this case, what happens if you step forward? Take a step forward, start walking forward. What would happen? You would fall. Yeah, you would fall. You would fall. Probably fall. And what would happen once you would fall? Looks like a fair, nothing good. Probably I'm going to go for death. You'd probably be lucky if you just had a broken neck. It looks really, really, high. I'm going to say you'd probably die, right? But if you walk forward, you will certainly fall, right? Yeah, fight for life. If you get a chance to fight even for your life, good luck with that. You'd luck out. But certainly dire consequences will ensue if you go this way, right? If you take your piece of meat and you stay still, what happens? You just stay still. So instead of going forward, you just stay still. What happens? You stay right here. Nothing happens, Hema says. I agree. Nothing more or less. Whatever was happening is going to keep happening. So if it was a nice view, then you're going to keep having your nice view. And here you are, right? The situation is not going to necessarily change, right? What happens if you go right? Let's say you decide to go right. Nothing. Once again, you're just going to be a little more to the right and still, same situation, but you'll be more to the right and so on. So can we agree there's a difference between going here, going here, going here, going back, and staying put? Do we agree that this one here, this is a big difference here? The forward one stands out. There's something happening here. However, we're going to clarify that upon further analysis. There's something going on with the forward movement. Yeah, I agree. I agree. And so let's compare that with this now, all right? Here's another situation. Once again, here's the meat that you know and love and can control. That's you, right? And you have the same options, right? We can go back. You can stay put. You can go forward. You can go left. You can go right. Let's just leave it as a kind of a video game crosshair, And once again, you'll notice here there's a bit of a line in the sand. What happens if you walk forward in this situation? Nothing happens. You're still on sand, and you just probably stop on the line or whatever, but nothing happens, right? The line might become a blur if you step on it. Yeah, exactly. But nothing as consequential, right? Nothing as consequential. Let's just go back. Let's do a little contrast. Nothing huge. I agree. Like, let's say, for instance, you're on your phone, you're not paying attention, and you're walking, and you keep walking forward. Will you fall? Yes or no? You're looking at your phone. You're not paying attention. You keep walking forward. Will you fall? Yes or no? Yes, I agree. You will fall. So what does that mean? Let's unpack this. It means that there's something happening here, right, at this boundary over here, right? There's something happening. Looks like a trident right now. There's something happening at this boundary. Let me fatten that line right here. There's something happening at this line, and that something happening will happen with or without your consciousness, right? A person who walks forward with the intent of committing suicide falls. A person who walks forward out of inattention because they were looking at their phone, falls. Cognition is not required. Cognition doesn't change a thing. Either way, you fall. Do we agree? You fall. Let's contrast that here. Now, here's a line in the sand. Here's a line in the sand. Let's say you're on your phone, you're not paying attention, you're walking, and you cross the line. You cross the line, and you're on your phone, you did pay attention. What happens? Nothing huge. Nothing huge, nothing different, right? Now, presumably, let's hypothesize here for a moment. if there's a line in the sand, I mean, this looks like it's made by a human. Do you agree? This wasn't made by an animal. There's even a stick nearby. This looks like it was made by a human. Maybe it could have been made by some sort of, I don't know, a crab or something. But this was a line made in the sand. Let's imagine it was made by a human. And let's imagine this was a line that was delimiting, let's say you're playing a game with your friends, right? Some sort of game that you made up. You're at the beach or something like that, and you're having fun. And you're playing a game. If it's a game and you cross over the line, what happens? If this was a line in a game, a boundary of some sort, in some sort of game you're playing, and you cross the line, what happens? Yeah, you lose, you lose points. Someone could go, or, ha, or something like that, right? But if you take away the participants of the game, if none of your friends are there to enforce the crossing of the line, let's say there's no one there to go, or you lose, or tag you're it, or, something like that. If there are no other humans around to enforce this game, what happens when you cross the line? There's only you. You're walking forward. There's not all your friends are gone. You walk over the line, or it used to be, let's say, a playing field for another family that was playing, and you just walk right over. Do you lose points, or does that? Again, nothing happens, right? Nothing happens. You don't lose points unless there's people there that are holding you against, this boundary line is supposed to mean something, right? So let's say if you're one person here, right? It does make no difference. Here, let's go back to this one, right? You can imagine maybe there's other people around. Maybe there's other people on the side looking at you, right? Let's say there's other people looking at you as you cross the line. Here's a line, right? What happens on the other side? They're looking at you. This is their gaze, right? They're looking at you. You cross the line, what happens to you? What happens? You still fall. You fall. You fall. So this is important. Let's now sort of summarize those results. Can we agree that, so we said a moment ago, right, that with or without your consciousness, yeah, they'll look at you fall. They might film it on YouTube and go, oh my God, this is horrible, and warn you or scream at you, something like that. But either way, once you're over the line, you fall. So a moment ago, we said, yeah, they're going to be like, this is horrible. What are you doing, right? They'll certainly not be indifferent about what they see, right? But it's going to happen. It's going to happen, right? Irrespective. So a moment ago, we said, okay, so this boundary here, with or without your conscious awareness, something happens on the other side, right? This boundary here, if you're inattentive, with or without, well, it makes a difference. Without your consciousness, without your awareness that you just stepped over the line, quote unquote, nothing happens. Likewise, if you go here, right, if there are other people, right, it makes no difference. With or without other people, you fall on the other side of this thing. Here, the presence of people is vital to enforcing the game, right? It has to be, for a game to be played, for this to be a boundary. I suppose you could play a game with yourself, right? But even then, you'd have to keep caring about the game in order not to step over the boundary. The day you're tired, let's say you draw a circle around yourself. Let's say you're alone and you draw a circle around yourself in the sand, and you say, I can't escape the circle, and that's your game. And then you're tired, it's time to go home. You can just stop caring. And the moment you stop caring, you realize it's just a line in the sand, and you cross over it, right? It vitally requires, humans around. So we have two boundaries here. I want to study a contrast here between two kinds of boundaries. I'm going to call them boundaries. There's one on the left and there's one on the right. And you'll notice either way, right, you have some freedom. So that's you, right? Well, that's your piece of meat. And that's you, that's your piece of meat. You have freedom on what you're going to do. The options are stay still, go forward, back, side, and so on. But in one situation, the one on the left, right, it doesn't require your awareness. Although your awareness, if you are aware and you're crossing over, you'll take stock of that whole spectacle of you falling. But either way, you'll just fall, right? And things are very different over here, right? So if we compare these two lines, Can we agree that there's something different, like fundamentally different about these two lines? Do we agree? These two boundaries are of a different nature. Like these two boundaries, there's something different going on. Yeah, right? I'm going to give them a technical terminology, and then we're going to practice it together so we can see if we understand these concepts well, right? I'm going to say that the boundary, if we ask the question, what is the difference between these two boundaries? I'm going to summarize it as follows. You might say that the boundary on the left is a mind-independent boundary. By that I mean it's independent of whether or not any minds are around to take stock of it, right? Doesn't mean that it excludes a mind. You could have a mind there. For instance, you could notice it's there, and other people could see you doing this, and there could be other people, and there could be your own consciousness kind of bathing this scene with its own light, right? You could look down and see it and be aware. Awareness is fine. But either way, right, you might say, like, if there is awareness, right, then you fall. And if there is no awareness, so let's say minus A, right, then if there's no awareness and you walk forward, you're not aware, what happens to you? Then you fall. Exactly, right? And that's why it's mind independent. It's independent of any mind, right? You can have, look, it's still, you can be aware of it. Independent doesn't mean it excludes mind. That's a distinct possibility. This first row that I've got here, if there's a mind, then you fall, is a possibility. But either way, with or without a mind, you fall, right? Likewise, with or without people, right? Other minds, your mind, other people, right? You fall. So let's let P stand for other people, right? With other people, you cross over the line, you fall. With no other people, you cross over the line and you fall. It's like whatever happens, this boundary does mark an important demarcation in the metaphysical landscape, right? So you're asking, okay, so I'm a human in the world. What's the world around me? The world around me includes these kinds of boundaries. I mean, the world is replete with these kinds of boundaries. And the world around me also includes these kinds of boundaries. And they're different, right? This kind of boundary we'll call a mind-dependent boundary. Why? Because they depend on a mind. You need a mind for this one, right? It's a rule, basically, that says you can't cross over the line, let's say. But that rule needs to be enforced. Is there a special gravity police? Is that a thing? Yes or no? Gravity police, like the laws of nature, gravity police. You violated the laws of nature. Yes or no? Gravity police, is that a thing? We talk about the laws of nature, right? Yeah, it's absurd. We don't need, can you imagine, like a little bureaucrat or police officer posted at every cliff? You could have, look, you could have a government person who's paid to draw a mind-dependent boundary here to say, watch out. That could be a thing. That could be a thing. And that person could be paid to scream at people, watch out, in some sort of national park. That could totally be a thing. Yeah. And that happens, right? If you go to the subway, like a SkyTrain, like there's people sometimes that are paid to do that, and there's like little bumps and stuff to tell you, watch out. You know, if you're disabled and you need to feel out this thing, or even if you can see perfectly, it's a good reminder. You could totally do, and you could do multiple lines like this, right? You could do that, and these would need enforcement, and they would need your awareness. This yellow line would need enforcement. It would need your awareness, right? You'd have to be aware. If someone writes a sign that says, no trespassing or be careful, but it's in a language you don't understand, it doesn't mean anything to you. It requires your awareness, right? The falling, though, doesn't require any person. Doesn't require your mind or the mind of another person. Things are really different here. Things here require your mind and or the mind of other people, right? That's a mind dependent boundary. It depends. It's still a boundary. You can still see something there. That's still a thing, right? But it depends on minds. And so that's the distinction that I want us to have. Let's have some fun now. Let's practice this. This is a wall, good old wall. And for some reason, this person's butting heads against this boundary, right? The boundary is there. And look, this person's aware that there's a boundary and they're just putting their head against it. But aware or not aware, it's going to stop this person. What sort of boundary are we looking at right now? This wall, is it a mind-dependent or mind-independent boundary? Yeah, mind-independent boundary. Agreed. It's a mind-independent boundary. Look, if you can see it, that's great, right? But see it or not see it, it's there. You could walk into it like a weird, Mr. Bean or Charlie Chaplin scene where you're not paying attention, or Mr. Magoo or something, and you bump into it, right? So you're still there, but there, mindful of it or not, it's there, and it obstructs your path. It limits your freedom of movement, right? So it's a mind-independent boundary. Walking over these cones, mind-dependent or mind-independent boundary? You see the cones and you're like, the hell with it, and you walk right over. Or you weren't paying attention. Who knows what the story is? Maybe you were on your phone. Maybe you just don't care. Yeah, mind-dependent boundary. That's right. You got it, Malika, David, you got it. Aaron, you got it. A mind-dependent boundary. Whatever these cones mean, they mean that in virtue of a convention, right? And for someone to care that you step over this line, because I could go ahead, this looks like it's in the desert. I could literally put some cones anywhere and walk across them. Yeah. And Aaron says, yeah, because people thought to make a boundary. Now, whatever the reason is, it's a fact. And remember, now we're just using this method of honesty. We're just looking around and taking stock of these situations. It is a fact that you can just go ahead and walk over it. So I'm asking myself, what sort of being am I? What am I capable and not capable of? Right? So what is it that I can and cannot do? And look, I can walk over this thing, right? And I cannot, it's also part of the honesty, I cannot, walk through a wall. I just can't. I can't walk through a wall. I can't keep walking. It isn't the case of, Roadrunner cartoons, when the cartoon character hasn't noticed that they're falling off a cliff. What happens? Like when Roadrunner, I don't know if you remember the old cartoons, but when you run over a cliff and you're a cartoon character and you haven't noticed yet that you're falling, what happens to the character? They're still running. Yeah, life's not like that. Yeah, they're running in the sky. And then it's hilarious. They always have this moment where they look down and go, oh, and then they notice they're falling. And then with the cognition comes the gravity, right? It's like, no, gravity does not require your cognition. The Wile E. Coyote stuff, yeah, life's not like that. So if you're going to say, what sort of world am I in and what sort of being am I? Well, I'm in a world, and sometimes it obstructs my path. And sometimes, it kind of does, but it's a kind of that I can just not care about. I can just go ahead and walk over these cones because that's a mind-dependent boundary, right? And it depends on other people being there, and it depends on my caring, and depends on all sorts of things of whatever nature, right, that are inside our minds that we've decided are rules. And the rules can mark a boundary, but the rules themselves are perfectly capable of being transgressed in a way that the wall cannot. Let's look at another example. Here's a soccer ball. Now, the soccer ball, right, can it go left, up, down? Can it go right? Can a soccer ball roll right? Even if there's a line here, can it roll right? Being a sphere on a surface, it could totally roll right. But there's a line there, right? There's a line, but the ball, so far as it goes as a sphere on a grass, has no more trouble going to this side on the right here than it does going on the left or any direction, right? The grass is no different. It's differently colored. Now, the difference in color means something. Who does it mean something to? The difference in color here, the fact that this part here is white as opposed to green, who does this mean something to? It means something to a mind, probably a lot of minds, if there is a whole match going on, right? Like thousands of minds looking down on this stuff are going to care deeply about this boundary. Right? But absent the referee, absent the athlete, absent the coach, absent the crowd, absent anyone who knows or cares about the rules of soccer, and kids aren't born knowing the rules of soccer, and it's not like, so what sort of boundary is this now? So if we had to ask ourselves, what sort of boundary is this? Is this mind dependent or mind independent? It's mind dependent. That's right. And Aaron says you could take it any way you want if you weren't playing soccer. It's conditional upon the acceptance of the rules of soccer. It's like, if you accept the rules of soccer, then this means something. This discoloration in the grass is supposed to give you pause, right? But only if you agree to those rules. If you don't agree, who the hell cares, right? And so you have to be part of that system of conventions, and you have to accept them in order for that to be a thing. And if you didn't, then you can still go. Physically, the thing can still go. So you can say there's a difference here. You might rephrase that into cultural and natural differences also, right? You can say culturally, maybe there's a difference amongst a certain group that says, hey, this is a thing. But, you know, you might say the hell with it. And certainly the ball can roll across this thing. All right, so contrary to the soccer ball now, can this ball go anywhere it wants right now, given the situation? Yes or no? Can it go anywhere it wants? It's stuck. I agree. It cannot go anywhere it wants, right? There's something limiting its movement, right? There's something limiting its movement. The things that are limiting its movement, must someone be there to enforce it and be aware? Are minds required in order to enforce this stuckness? Yeah, minds are not required. Minds are not required. This might be the ball that you lost, and you might be looking at it, and a mind can be added, right? The ball doesn't have wants, but we're concerned with the boundaries, not so much about whether the ball has wants, just the boundary themselves. And we could easily find ourselves in the same position as the ball. Yeah, so it's not so much about what the ball can do as of which boundaries permit and not permit. And we live in the same world as the balls, right? So yeah, Jason, does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah, our attention is not so much at the balls as to the boundaries themselves. That's our object of study. And so in this case, what sort of boundary would you call this gutter? A mind dependent or mind independent? A mind independent, yeah. A mind independent. And this is important, by the way, and I want to pick up on what Jason said. There is a sense in which, Jason, I think you'll agree to this. There's a sense in which I'm ball-like as well, and so are you. Like when we act in the world, we're not just ghosts, right? We're flesh and blood. Like the thing that hits against the wall isn't my mind, it's my skull, the good old-fashioned hard skull. And we're part ball-like. We're also, in some sense, a thing in the world, just a brute piece of thing, right? So we're just an animated thing. Yeah, yeah. Exactly. There are limits to the possibilities. Exactly. If you were a ghost, you could just walk through walls, right? Isn't that what ghosts do? They're disembodied, right? They have no fleshy limitations. They can walk, but humans have limitations. Exactly. Right. Here's one of the limitations. And this is one that we take for granted, but it's a boundary. You can't fly. The fact that you can't fly, is this a mind dependent or mind independent boundary? The thing that compels you to stay on the ground. Is that mind dependent or mind independent? It's a mind independent boundary, right? It permeates your whole relationship with the gravity itself and the fact that just like you have to fall, you can't fly up. You want to, who cares, right? Whether you're aware of it or not, it's just you can't take off and fly. Again, ignorance of that law of gravity, this boundary, right? Even if you don't take stock of it, you could pass a lie. This kid could pass a lie detector test and score 100% on earnestness and sheer conviction and commitment to flying like Superman, and he's not taking off, right? There's no amount of, resolve and we could all of us, all 7 billion of us on the planet can all agree, yes, you can do it, you can do it, you can, and no, he's not getting off the ground, right? The only way to get off the ground is nature to be commanded must be obeyed, is to do like the Wright brothers and then to build a bloody airplane. You're not just going to go and start flying like this. There's a mind independent boundary right there, kind of like the gutter, right? All right, so now we know this important distinction. What I'm going to do now is we're going to look at some cases together, and I want you to think in terms of mind independent boundaries, and I want you to ask yourself whether or not you can or cannot. And the can or cannot here is going to be a metaphysical can or cannot, like not so much a can or cannot like would it be frowned upon by your peers, but really, can you do it in the metaphysical sense? So let's get started. For instance, let's think of your appearance, a haircut, right? Can you get whatever haircut you want? Can or cannot? Type it in. Yeah, you get whatever haircut you want. You can, right? Doesn't mean you have to, doesn't mean you want to, doesn't mean there will be no consequences attached to it, right? But you can do whatever you want when it comes to your appearance, within the limits of, biology. So for instance, this person shaved the side of their head. If tomorrow or the next minute they decide they want the hair back, they can't let that hair grow any faster than it grows. So the rate of hair growth, that's a mind independent boundary. But the ability to cut your hair, the the subtractive part of cutting your hair, that's something you can totally do. So you can do whatever you decide with your appearance, right? If you think of it as a line, it's a line in the sand or it's a precipice. Your haircut, is it a line in the sand or is it a precipice? It's a line in the sand. It's totally a line in the sand. Like a precipice would be like if no one, like there would be some severe consequence. You really just couldn't do it. It's totally a line in the sand. If you decide to care, fine. But if not, you just go ahead and do it. So metaphysically, you're the kind of thing that can cut its hair. That's terrific. That's interesting to know, right? What about food? Let's go for food. When it comes to food, cannot eat whatever you decide. So let's say you want to go for, let's eat spicy food tonight, right? Or not spicy, or can, right? I mean, you can even eat something that's bad for you, but the consequences are not up to you. But you can put it in your mouth, chew and swallow, right? You can do whatever you decide, right? Not anything, though. Well, that's not quite true. I mean, if you can put it in your mouth, chew and swallow, you can do it. It might not be advisable, right? The consequences are not up to you, right? But you can. You can, Yeah, you can't eat. That's true. That's true. But in a without looking for the weird cases, you can't eat moon rocks because they're not available to you. But Jason, if I had a moon rock in front of me and I could say, put it in your mouth and swallow, you could, couldn't you? Like if it fits your mouth, right, within those parameters, massage the circumstances just right, it'd be an idiotic thing to do, but you could do it. And look, notice the can includes idiotic things, right, Jason? Yeah, the can includes idiotic things. Like I wouldn't recommend eating moon rocks, but I would imagine if there was a moon rock, there'd be some YouTuber twit who'd want to brag that they once ate a moon rock, and they'd film the video of themselves pooping it the next day. And they'd have bragging rights and street cred on YouTube and in the internet because, hey, have you ever known, Tide Pods, have you ever known anyone who's pooped a moon rock, right? Or something like that. But you can do those foolish things, right? The metaphysical fact is you can eat whatever you want. And let's just stay on food for a second, right? Let's not gravitate towards fanciful examples, just staying with realistic thing here. Let's say, for instance, today you ate non-veg food. Can tomorrow you eat veg? Can or cannot? Like today you ate non-veg, tomorrow you eat veg. You can, right? What about this? Could I do this? I don't know, today? The 9th. Every odd numbered day I eat veg, and every even numbered day I eat non-veg. Could I do that? Can or cannot? Yeah, I could. I could totally do that, right? What about this is going to be wild and crazy. Sit down. This is going to be mind-blowing. Could I order and eat in the same plate sushi on one side of the plate and saag paneer on the other side? Could I do that? Can or cannot? I could totally do that. And what a weird combination, right? Like, it's not like, I don't think there's anyone out there who serves that plate or any restaurant, right? But I could totally do that, right? You crazy guy, right? Of course, you see here, I'm violating a line in the sand if I do that, right? There's a little bit of a boundary there that we've accepted that, oh, wow, these things don't mix, right? One's warm and the other's cold, and one's, spicy and the other's all minimalist, like, whatever. But you can totally do that. Yeah, you can do whatever you decide, right? What about career? Can or cannot do whatever you decide? So I'm going to try a career, at least pursue a career. Whether or not you succeed is a different story, but can you pursue any career you want? Like, let's say this guy, for instance, an early childhood educator, is like, yeah, man, let's just go for that. I feel like being that. Let's try that. Can or cannot? Yeah, totally can, right? And that's actually a big decision, right? Try, yeah. Do not necessarily, of course, because whether or not someone pays you for it, right? Like I can try to be an astronaut. Whether or not I'll actually become one's a different question. You got to be good at something. You got to be hired. Someone has to pay you. But you can pursue whichever career you want for sure, right? And that's great, right? At the same time, could I just, like, let's say this guy, right? He's in early childhood education. Let's say he's done this for 2 years. And then for whatever reason, he decides, hey, I want to be an architect. Can he do that? 2 years in, it's like, I changed careers. I want to be an architect. Can or cannot? Yeah, can. Totally can. And then after, let's say, 2 years of being an architect or 5 years of being an architect, he goes, I want to go back to EC. Can or cannot? Early childhood educators. He did 5 years of this. And again, let's go back to the food thing. Could you be, let's say, every odd numbered year, you're a cook, and every even-numbered year, you're a delivery person. Could you do that? Yeah, you could. That's really unusual, and a bit like the sushi and the saag paneer. Could you be? I don't know. What would be two careers? What would be two weird careers? You can imagine, like, by day you're one thing, and by night, like AM, PM. Let's say in the morning you're this, and then combine something weird. Surprise me with an unusual combination. In the morning you're this job, a criminal and a cop. Yeah, teacher and a DJ. That's pretty cool. You could be a criminal and a cop. You really could, though. And that's unfortunately happens too, Jason, right? And that never goes well. Those don't blend really well. That gives you indigestion. That's like, there's some foods that don't mix, right? Teacher and a DJ. Yeah, teacher in the morning and DJ at night, right? You can totally be that. And Malika, now you know about me. You saw me at the club, didn't you, the other day? It's like, toots, toots. Hey, what's up, yo? You know, Dr. Sound in the house, you know, like Dr. Champagne. I don't have to make up my stage name. Dr. Champagne, people think I made that up. You know, they'd be like, you know, yo, all right. I could totally do that, right? So yeah. What about fashion? Can or cannot do whatever you decide. Like, let's go 1970s today. Dressing, I'm rocking the 70s. Look at Bruce Lee. Look at that shirt. I would add a gold pendant, right? That's right. Yeah, that's what I would look like, Jason. That's what I look like when I'm DJ Dr. Mike Champagne. That's my professional look, my friends. Check it out. Are you girl? What's up? Big success with the ladies and the guys too, right? Just completely rocking it. Yeah, I could do that. And notice that everything I just said applies, right? Let's say you were dressing. You were a goth, and then you decide you want to be a prep. You can turn on a 50 Cent and bloody change yourself, right? Yeah, only Bruce Lee, because we know Bruce Lee, you mess with him, right? Only Bruce Lee could pull that look off. I don't pull it off, Jason. You don't want to see me when I'm doing my my clubbing scene. Friends, can or cannot do whatever you decide. Let's say you can't, your friends don't have to like you back, but if, on the assumption that they do and they cooperate, yeah, you pick whatever friends you want. It's like, I want to have friends. I want to have lots of friends. Not a lot of friends, no friends, right? You can do whatever you decide, right? That's a thing. And likewise, you could also say, I don't want to be a friend anymore. Right? You can cut it off at any point for whatever reason, good, bad. You know, just like you can make bad decisions about eating moon rocks, you can make bad decisions about friendships. You can take on bad friends and you can dump good friends, but you can, right? Notice the can at each step is a metaphysical can, and you can do those things. Politics, can or cannot do whatever you decide. Your parents always used to vote this particular party. You're in the little box. You're behind the cardboard. Can you put the X wherever you want? Yeah, you totally can. You totally can. It doesn't matter what your parents did. It doesn't matter what you said you would do. It doesn't, you can, once you're there, you can do whatever you decide, right? Hobbies, can or cannot do whatever you decide. This one's painting a little Warhammer figurine. You can do video games. You can do nothing. You can, you know. Agreed. You can. And you can have one hobby, a zillion hobbies. You could change hobbies. You know, you can have weird combinations of hobbies. You can. Music, can or cannot do whatever you decide. Can. It's like, hey, you know, today it's industrial techno, and tomorrow it can be punk rock, and then after that it's going to be hip hop, and you can just decide also to stick to one style, you know, like you can also do that, and that's whatever, man, or no music whatsoever. That's also a choice. Just like when we had our feet, you can stay put. You say, no, I'm amusical, you know, and then you can also decide to say, no, the hell with that. I want to spend all my time with my headphones on. Sex, can or cannot do whatever you decide. Partner, position, you know, provided they're consenting. Yeah. Go ahead. You can, right? And including, I don't want to, including, you know, this person, many people, whatever, 2, 3, whatever, so long as, just like the friends, so long, and just like the career, so long as it's working, it's reciprocating. Yeah, you can. And you can switch around too. It's the same things I said about all the other stuff applies. Religion, can or cannot do whatever you decide. Like your parents, just like they voted a certain way, they're this religion, you change minds. Say, no, I'm switching. I was here, I'm going there. Can or cannot? Can. can, totally, right? Including nothing. You can say, hey, nothing also is an option, right? I don't want that. But there's nothing that forces you, right, to keep on with whatever religion. Chances are you were raised in a religious context. There's nothing forcing you to stay with that one or to stay at all with any. There's lots of people out there, lots of different traditions. Sport, can or cannot do whatever you decide. Yeah. How do you, whatever, like you like jogging, you like biking, you like lifting weights, you like playing tennis, you like doing nothing. Yeah, no sports. That's also a possibility, right? Education. Think of university, choosing your major. Can or cannot do whatever you decide. Yeah, you can. Again, within limits, right? Notice that the past sets limits on what you can do. If your transcript's not good, you might not get accepted, but you can certainly apply. What about not going to university? Is that a possibility? Yes or no? You say, I quit. Bye, KPU. I don't need you. Yeah, you can. It's a possibility. Right? You can totally do that. There's nothing requiring you to come to university. And then once you're there, there's nothing requiring you to take one particular major. I mean, there's reasons for and against, and there's, various other constraints, but whatever, you can, within those bounds, again, within the bounds of what's physically possible. And you can, and it's even optional, not just, your major, and that could be an option. I've often had students who've come to me for a career advice, and they say, which major should I choose? And in some cases, I've had to say, no, what you need to do is you need to stop university. You're not going to find what you're looking for here, So yeah, you can do whatever you want. All right, so let's put all this together. When we did all this, each time it was always a can. We always check the can box, right? Metaphysically, it turns out you're a very specific kind of creature. Remember, the question we were asking at the beginning is, and I gestured briefly at the method we were going to use and that our author is going to use, which is called phenomenology. And I just don't want to go into that because that's a whole can of worms. And it's a great can of worms, but we won't go into that. So basically the question is, what sort of being am I, right? It turns out you're this kind of being. So this is you, right? And you find yourself in the world. Because remember, that's what we said. Earlier we said, I exist in a world. All right, fair enough. I exist in the world. And then we want to ask the subsequent question, what sort of being am I? It's like, fair enough. So you exist in the world. So this is you, and this is the world around you, right? So I'm going to paint a picture now. And this is the picture that's we're going to see developed in our reading. This is a picture of the human condition, and that envelops you. This is you, all right? And you find yourself in the world, and the world has real mind-independent boundaries. That's what we mean by real. Something is real when it's mind-independent. Like it or not, know it or not, agree with it or not, it's just there. There are constraints. I'm going to put these big red lines on either side. It's not so much that they're cupping this image, but you know what I mean. There are real mind-independent boundaries. The fact that you can't fly, the fact that if you've shaved your head and a moment after you regret it, you want your hair to grow back in a flash, it just won't. Like, sorry, right? The subtractive stuff can happen really quickly. The growth happens really slowly, right? These are mind-independent boundaries. You can, if you want, drink bleach, but the consequences, given the laws of biology, of what's going to happen inside you once you do that are horrendous. You can, if you want, walk over the cliff, but the consequences, given the nature of gravity and your mass and whatever, are that you're going to fall likely to your death. Those consequences are not up for you to decide. You can be aware of them, but your awareness does not add or subtract from the fact that it's just there. And this is part of what we have to accept, that we live in this kind of world, right? It's a world with mind-independent boundaries. And so that would look like, given all the cans that we said when we're ticking those boxes, you have a terrifying degree of freedom. Like often we're like, we don't really stop to think about how free we really are metaphysically, right? Not culturally, but metaphysically, right? Not psychologically, but metaphysically. We are the kinds of beings who can do all of the weird stuff that we listed, right? Different sex partners, different religion, different voting, different haircut, different eating, different sport, different, you name it, you can do that. Different career. You have a terrifying degree of freedom, right, in how you're going to spend your life and what you're going to do with the little chunk of meat, which is the you over here. That's good old you. That's the chunk of meat in the world. It's unlike any other chunk of meat. It's the piece of matter that's under your control. Nothing else is like that. You're not Magneto. You can't control stuff at a distance. And that gives you, nevertheless, even if you're not Magneto, a terrifying degree of freedom. And the word terrifying is something that we're going to come back and look at, right? Now, you might think, yay, that's fantastic. But the truth is the picture's a little more complicated, right? There are also mind-dependent boundaries. The mind-dependent boundaries are the ones that we've looked at earlier. They do depend on minds on being enforced. Like, for instance, if you change religions, you will surprise your family and your friends, right? If you get a haircut, they'll be like, what the hell's going on with your haircut, right? If you're a criminal by day and a cop by night, or vice versa, I don't think the cops are going to be really happy about that, although the criminals might be delighted, right? There are mind-dependent boundaries. You know, the people around you are not indifferent to your actions. And there are rules, for better or for worse. We live in a world with all sorts of customs and traditions and cultures and rules, and they're there. But they're like lines in the sand. You can cross over them, right? You might not want to, but you can. So notice, for instance, this person on this path, if they wanted to go completely to one side, they could. They could keep walking in this path, but they also could not. That's a possibility. And there are two distinct kinds of boundaries here at play, and we flesh those out, right? And so what tends to happen, though, is because you have a terrifying degree of freedom, right? You don't want to deal with that. There's too many possibilities. So part of being a human often consists in doing the following. What we do is we invent these red lines. Notice how the real red lines, right, were very far. They afforded a lot of freedom. In fact, a terrifying degree of freedom. And it's so terrifying that we're actually not too happy to learn that we've got all this freedom. So what we do is we do this. The red lines now, the dotted red lines, are chosen boundaries that you tell yourself are mandatory. In order to spare yourself the responsibility of having to look at all the different possibilities that you're overlooking that you could be doing, right? Because if a mind-dependent boundary is acknowledged as mind-dependent, there comes with that an acknowledgement that you can transgress it. So let me say that slowly because it really matters, and I'm going to crunch every word and chew on it. A mind-dependent boundary, once you acknowledge its mind-dependent status, you realize there that you metaphysically are endowed with the possibility of just walking right over it. Right? You can do that metaphysically. It's part of the nature of reality itself that you're endowed with the ability to say, who cares, and just go ahead and do it and do differently for whatever reason, good or bad, right? But that entails that there's so much you could do that's actually terrifying. So what we do is we say that our chosen boundaries, the limitations that we place on ourselves, are not limitations that we place on ourselves, but they're actually mandatory. So we tell ourselves a story, right, that in fact, there's no other way of doing things. This is the only way of doing things. And if I went beyond that, it'd be kind of like a precipice. Essentially, what we do is we fool ourselves into thinking that the lines in the sands are like precipice boundaries. Right? But the fact remains that even despite that lie, from a metaphysical standpoint, remember, metaphysics is independent of epistemology. It's the branch of study of what exists independent of questions about knowledge. Independent of that strategy, right? Irrespective of this whole rigmarole that we tell ourselves, this self-deception, right? Of trying to pretend that a yellow line is actually a red line. And we saw there's a real difference there, right? We deceive ourselves into thinking that the yellow lines are in fact red lines, but they're not. But that's a terrifying prospect. We are left with a tremendous amount of freedom. Now, you might think to yourself, well, I've got a lot of freedom. I can do whatever I want. How about I go there? And you could, even if there was a yellow path, right, yellow boundaries around, you could metaphysically. But the situation is actually a little tricky. Right now, it looks like this person's just going to go in that direction. But the truth is, as they start heading there, what happens? Well, you have to break this down. They can't teleport themselves. This person over here, right, they're not going to walk in that direction in one go, like, pow, they're there. It's going to have to happen over time. You are also a creature that unfolds, like everything else in the universe, that unfolds in time. So you'll have to take this step by step. And if you take it step by step, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. So there you go. You want to head in that direction. You had all this freedom and you said, this is where I choose to go. Fair enough. And you take your first step. What happens when you find yourself here? What happens when you've taken your first step? You take the first step in that direction. What happens? you find yourself in exactly the same situation you were a moment ago. You find yourself free to go wherever you want. So it's not a given. It's not a given that, oh, I want to go there and there you go. You take a step, you find yourself right back in the initial position of having all the freedom you had previously. And if you want to keep going in the same direction, then that has to be yet another choice, right? And if you string together those other choices, yes, you will end up going in the direction that you initially set out to go, which was here. But the only way to get there is to keep choosing always in favor of the same direction, always in favor of the same direction. Because every time you take a step, the human condition is always the same. You're left with that same amount of freedom. Can everyone see that? That at every step you could decide to say, hey, I'm changing direction. Hey, I could change direction. If you can see that, type in yes. If you got a question or comment, let me know. This is important, super important. Because it would be a kind of self-deception to think that once you set a course, it happens on its own. Actually, no, a more delicate analysis of your situation will reveal that you make a decision. I want to be, I'd say, a marketing major. You're a week in, you can change your mind. You're 2 weeks in, you can change your mind. You can always change your mind. You're 12 weeks in, you're 2 years in, you're 6 years into your career, you can change your mind. You can, if you want, string together all of those decisions in a way that makes it coherent. If you do that, then the technical word that we'll employ for today's class that our author employs is a project. A project is going to be a series of decisions that are aiming in the same direction, if you will, that are undergoing the same path, right? Among the many possibilities that you could choose, there are an iterated choice of the same decision. Like, for instance, your haircut is probably a project. Look at your haircut for the last, scroll down your Facebook page and all your selfies. You've been having the same haircut, I think, for a little while. Yes or no? I don't know about your hair. Tell me about your hair. When's the last time you had a dramatic change of haircut? Yeah, probably yes, right? Yeah. Your haircut is a project in that strict sense. It's a decision. Right? You could still have any haircut you want, but it's that haircut you've chosen, and you keep re-choosing that haircut. When you go to the hairstylist or the barber, you tell them, same as last time, please. Same as last time, please. With minor variations, maybe. And likewise, if you're taking a major, if you're following a religion, if you have a partner, but all of those things are glued together by what? By a decision or the laws of physics. Your choice of partner, your choice of haircut, what glues together all of those micro decisions? Your decisions or the laws of physics? Your decisions, right? Decision after decision after decision to copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste. I will keep doing now what I've done before. I will keep doing now what I've done before. But at any time, you always find yourself in this situation. You find yourself in a world with a terrifying degree of freedom. And if you run away from that, you try to run as far away from you can, both physically and metaphorically. You don't like what I'm hearing. You don't like any of this. I don't like this. I'm running away. I hate where I am. I hate this whole situation. You run and you run, you run. Where do you find yourself? Always, always, always in the same situation. Burdened with a terrifying degree of freedom, living in a world that has a mixture of mind-independent constraints, mind-dependent constraints, which entails that the space of action afforded by you metaphysically, that the reality permits you, is actually dizzying. There's so much you could do, but because it's terrifying, you traffic those lines in the sands and pretend that they're walls. You pretend there's walls. Why don't you change partner? Because it's a wall. Why don't you change religion? Because it's a wall. Why don't you change haircut? Because it's a wall. Why don't you change food choice? Because it's a wall. Why don't you change the city in which you live? Because it's a wall. Excuse me, none of those things are walls. All of those things are lines in the sand. And so we tend to think of freedom as a good thing. Like, yay, freedom's a good thing. And in many senses it is, don't get me wrong. But what we're going to be studying together is the possibility that actually freedom is great, but it's also terrifying once you have it. Because if you analyze what it means to be a human, you have a terrifying degree of freedom, and that creates anxiety. Because there's no set plan of what it is you ought to do. You do you in the most frightening way. I mean, we hear that expression, you do you, as in, go ahead, do what you want. But no, it's actually such a big deal, right? There's so much you could be doing that you can do that it's terrifying, because there's nothing you can check against to say, oh, I'm doing the right thing. You decide. Someone could say you're doing the wrong thing, but you decide whether or not you care about that. That's also a decision, right? And so that, my friends, is a picture of the human condition. Is everyone ready for the preface? This was all table setting. We did an hour and 15 minutes for the exam and a whole hour of table setting. Are you ready for this reading? If you're good to go, tell me good to go. Let's start approaching this reading, these mind-blowing ideas. I'm going to stretch, take a sip of water. I'm going to put on my e-reader part. Malika says, that's the scary part about being an adult. It is. It is. And Aaron says, so to sum up what we've talked about, it's the human condition. That's right. Right? What sort of being are you, Aaron? And it turns out you're a terrifyingly free person. Yeah, terrifyingly free. And you don't want to be that free, actually. You know what? You don't want to be that free. We all think uncritically, freedom, I want more of it. No, actually, you probably don't. So let's read the preface first, and then we're going to do the reading. And I'm warning you once again, in many ways, if I do my job right, this will be a thought-provoking course, right? And the reading is going to be, remember what makes this continental philosophy is the style of reading is going to be different. So let's do the preface. So far, we've looked at branches of philosophy that are divided according to their respective subject matters. Yet we can also organize and classify different texts by their writing styles and method. The people who work in a tradition called continental philosophy are also interested in core subjects like metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, and politics, but the manner in which they tackle those subjects is a bit different from what we've encountered thus far. Our reading by Simone de Beauvoir explores what it means to be human. Its surprising conclusion is that there is nothing in particular that you have to do. You might think, well, I have to attend school, don't I? Actually, no, you don't. I have to brush my teeth, don't I? No, you don't really have to. Any activity you might come up with is in some sense optional. Having kids, owning a car, learning to play the guitar, staying in touch with your high school friends, reading a popular book, dressing a certain way, etc. None of these things are obligatory. True, you can encounter social disapproval if you don't do some of these things. But organizing your behavior to avoid social disapproval is also optional. You don't have to care what others around you think. All that is mandatory is that, like it or not, 1, we're alive. 2, we always find ourselves in a particular situation, boring or exciting. 3, time goes on. And 4, whatever choice you make, even the refusal to make a choice, is a choice. You might believe that some supreme intelligence looks down on you like a giant parent and disapproves of your actions whenever those actions fail to match its alleged expectations. But you have to decide to believe this rather far-fetched story. So in the end, you are always in charge. Beauvoir explores how our choices give meaning to our lives. The moment I decide to be a dentist, for instance, it becomes clear what I must do. Study, open a clinic, attract clients, etc. But this must is located inside an if-then proposition. If I want to be a dentist, then I must do such and such. Nothing compels anyone to assert that first if part, or to assert it continuously. You're always free to change your mind and rearrange your life. The result of Beauvoir's existentialist exploration is that we humans have a disturbingly high degree of freedom. And because that freedom is almost total, whatever meaning we find in our lives is meaning we brought to our lives. It'd be reassuring if there was some pre-existing life plan that we had to live out, wear this, do this, eat this, etc. However, Beauvoir argues, belief in such a pre-existing life plan is merely a way to hide from our own mortal limitations and responsibility. Not only is our mortality scary, so is facing the wide variety of projects that we are free to pursue. There are many tasks that we're drawn to, but that we're scared about, like asking an attractive person on a date, starting one's dream business, competing in sports, going on a trip to a foreign country, switching to another major, and so on. Since it takes courage to do those things, and since we know that no matter how enjoyable those things are, they will eventually end, it's much easier to fall back into a routine and simply do what everybody else is doing. Indeed, whenever we're reminded by people like Beauvoir that we choose to live a conformist life and that nothing prevents us from following our dreams right now, we stick our heads in the sand and pretend that culture is nature, as if the accepted practices of the humans around us had to be that way. Only your individual choice makes social norms appear normal. For instance, of course men don't wear dresses, or of course you should major in business. Yet you can always adopt the perspective of an outsider and see those conventions for what they are. Conventions. It's by no means obvious that men shouldn't wear dresses or that you should major in business, much less attend university. Tomorrow is the first day of the rest of your life. This is a true statement. Since nothing is decided in advance, what will you do? Only you can decide. Continental philosophers experiment with creative language to convey such powerful and powerfully disturbing insights. Now, for convenience, I've abridged the text and highlighted the main passages. Do read the whole thing, however, and be sure to write notes in the margins. That's really helpful for the final exam. And remember also that philosophical texts require multiple readings, and the first reading is always the scariest. I'll do it with you, though, and it's worth it. So be brave as you grapple with these amazing ideas. And unfortunately, we don't yet have a course in continental philosophy at KPU, although as chair, I will work to eventually change that. And I teach some continental philosophy in all of my classes. And hopefully all the table setting is going to make this difficult reading easier. But remember, you'll require rereads, right? So we're only doing the first read. So stand ready to read this again. Pyrrhus and Cineas. One day, Pyrrhus was devising projects of conquest. We're going to subjugate Greece first, he was saying. And after that, said Cineas, we will vanquish Africa. After Africa, we will go on to Asia. We will conquer Asia Minor, Arabia. And after that, we will go on as far as India. After India, said Pyrrhus, I will rest. Why not rest right away, said Cineas. Cineas seems wise. What's the use of leaving if it is to return home? What's the use of starting if you must stop? And yet, if I don't first decide to stop, it seems to me to be even more pointless to leave. If Pyrrhus could push the limits of his conquest back beyond the earth, beyond the stars and the furthest nebulae, to an infinity that would be constantly fleeing before him, his undertaking would be only more foolish because of it. His efforts would be dispersed without ever coming together for any goal. Viewed by reflection, all human projects therefore seem absurd because they exist only by setting limits for themselves. And one can always overstep these limits, asking oneself derisively, why as far as this? Why not further? What's the use? Man plants, builds, conquers. He wants, he loves. There is always an after that. Between Pyrrhus and Cineas, the dialogue starts over with no end. And yet, Pyrrhus must decide. He stays or he leaves. If he stays, what will he do? If he leaves, how far will he go? There exists no ready-made attachment between the world and me. And as long as I am a simple given in the midst of nature, nothing is mine. A country is not mine if I only grew there like a plant. What is built upon me, without me, is not mine. The rock that passively supports a house cannot claim that the house is its own. In order to appropriate safely goods that are not our own, we can still resort to other ruses. Seated by his fire and reading in his newspaper the tale of someone who climbed the Himalayas, the contented bourgeois cries out proudly, now there's what a man can do. He feels like he climbed the Himalayas himself. By identifying himself with his sex, his country, his class, with the whole of humanity, a man can increase his garden, but he increases it only in words. This identification is but an empty pretension. In order for an object to belong to me, it must have been founded by me. It is totally mine only if I founded it in its totality. The only reality that belongs entirely to me, therefore, is my act. Even a work fashioned out of materials that are not mine escapes me in certain ways. What is mine is first the accomplishment of my project. A victory is mine if I fought for it. What is mine is therefore first what I do. But as soon as I have done it, the object goes and separates itself from me. It escapes me. The thought that I expressed a moment ago, is it still my thought? In order for the past to be mine, I must make it mine again each instant by taking it toward my future. My relationship with things are not given, are not fixed. I create them minute by minute. Some die, some are born, and others are revived. They're constantly changing. Thus, our relationship with the world is not decided from the onset. It is we who decide. But we do not arbitrarily decide just anything. What I surpass is always my past and the object, such as it exists within my past. My future envelops that past. The former cannot build itself without the latter. If I have ever worried about Babylon, I cannot suddenly choose to be interested in the latest theories about the location of Babylon. I cannot suffer a defeat if I was not engaged in the vanquished country. I will suffer defeat in accordance with my engagements. It can happen that, in light of a new fact, one suddenly becomes aware of engagements that have been lived without being thought. But at least they had to have existed. As distinct from me, things never affect me. I am never affected except in my own possibilities. We're therefore surrounded by forbidden wealth, and we often get irritated with these limits. We would like the entire world to become ours. We covet the goods of others. I knew, among others, one young student who wanted first to make the world of the athlete hers, then that of the gambler, the flirt, the adventurer, the politician, one after another. She tried her hand in each of these domains without understanding that she remained a student hungry for experience. She believed that she was varying her life, but the unity of her life unified all of its diverse moments. But is enjoyment rest? Will we find it in us? And can it ever fulfill us? The sweetest melody, repeated indefinitely, becomes an annoying refrain. The taste, at first delicious, soon sickens me. An unchanging enjoyment that stays the same for too long is no longer felt as a plenitude. In the end, it merges with the perfect absence. For enjoyment is the presence of an object to which I feel present. It is presence of the object and of myself in the heart of their difference. But as soon as the object is handed over to me, the difference dissolves. As soon as I eliminate the distance that, in separating me from the object, allows me to throw myself towards it, to be movement and transcendence, this fixed union of the object in me no longer exists except in the way a thing does. A pleasure is even more precious if it is newer, if it stands out more intensely against the uniform background of time. But the instant limited to itself alone is not new. It is only new in its relationship with the past. That figure that just appeared is only distinct if the ground that supports it is itself distinct as ground. At the side of the sunny road, the coolness of the shade is most precious, and a break is relaxing after tiring exercise. From the top of the hill, I look at the path traveled, and the entire path is present in the joy of my success. The walk gives rest its worth, and my thirst gives the glass of water its worth. The whole path comes together in the moment of enjoyment. And I don't just contemplate it. To enjoy a good thing is to use it, to throw oneself with it toward the future. To enjoy the sun or the shade is to feel its presence as a slow enrichment. I feel my strength being reborn in my relaxed body. I rest in order to leave again. While looking at the path travel, I look at those valleys toward which I'm going. I look at my future. All enjoyment is project. The pouting child withdraws into a corner and says, I don't care about anything. But soon he looks around, he fidgets, he gets bored. When life withdraws into itself, it's not peaceful ataraxia, the Greek word for intellectual serenity, but the anxiety of indifference that flees from itself, that tears itself away from itself, that appeals to the other. Man is a being of faraway places, says Heidegger. He's always somewhere else. There exists no privileged spot in the world about which he can say safely, "This is me." He is constitutively oriented towards something other than itself. The man lying in the shade at the top of the hill is not only there on that piece of earth that his body embraces. He is present to those hills that he perceives. He is also in the faraway cities as someone who is absent. He rejoices in this absence. Even if he closes his eyes and tries to think about nothing, he feels like himself in contrast with the background of immobile and unconscious heat in which he bathes. It is because man is transcendence that it is so difficult for him to ever imagine any paradise. Paradise is rest. It is transcendence abolished, a state of things that is given and does not have to be surpassed. But then what shall we do there? The beauty of the promised land is that it is promised new promises. Immobile paradises promise us nothing but eternal boredom. Pyrrhus speaks of resting only because he lacks imagination. Once returned home, he will hunt, he will legislate, he will go to war again. If he tries to stay truly at rest, he will only yawn. One cannot fulfill a man. He's not a vessel that docilely allows itself to be filled up. His condition is to surpass everything given. To live a love is to throw oneself through that love towards new goals, a home, a job, a common future. Since man is project, his happiness, like his pleasures, can only be projects. The man who's made a fortune immediately dreams of making another. Pascal said it perfectly. It is not the hare that interests the hunter, it is the hunt. The goal is the goal only at the end of the path. As soon as it's attained, it becomes a new starting point. A goal is always the meaning and the result of an effort. Separated from that effort, no reality is a goal, but only a given, made to be surpassed. If the stakes are taken away from it, the struggle loses all meaning and truth. It is no longer a struggle, but a stupid marching in place. The notion of end is ambiguous, since every end is a point of departure at the same time. But this does not prevent it from being seen as an end. Man's freedom resides in this power. Isn't Pyrrhus absurd to leave in order to return home? Isn't the tennis player absurd to hit a ball in order for someone to send it back to him? And the skier absurd to climb a slope in order to immediately come back down? Pyrrhus is not leaving in order to return. He is leaving in order to conquer. That undertaking is not contradictory. A project is exactly what it decides to be. It has the meaning that it gives itself. One cannot define it from the outside. It is not contradictory. It is possible and coherent as soon as it exists, and it exists as soon as man makes it exist. I judge the movement of my transcendence to be futile, but I cannot prevent it. Time continues to flow by. The instants push me forward. Any stopping is impossible because transcendence is a perpetual surpassing. But an indefinite project is absurd since it leads to nothing. It is Pyrrhus and not Cineas who is right. Pyrrhus leaves in order to conquer. Let him conquer. Then after that, he'll see. One can surpass one project only by realizing another project. No instant joins up with the eternal. Ecstasy and anguish still have their place in time. They're projects themselves. Every thought, every feeling is project. Thus, the life of man does not appear as a progress, but as a cycle. What good does it do, he says, and he continues his task. I now see that moment of doubt or of ecstasy where all projects seem useless to me as a fit of ill humor or puerile exaltation. Between those two moments, who will judge? They exist together only by a third moment that must in turn be judged. We can always escape toward an elsewhere, but this elsewhere is still a somewhere in the heart of our human condition. We never escape from that human condition. We have no way to envision it from the outside in order to judge it. It is with our human condition that good and evil are defined. The words utility, progress, and fear have meaning only in a world where the project has made points of view and ends appear. My friends, this was our reading. What did you think? It's a bit of an ink blot, right? It's quite motivational, but it's also depressing. Do you see that, Malika? Can you see the other side as well? Like, it's motivational. You can do whatever you want, but it's depressing. Whatever you do is only good because you do it and it'll end. And when you end it, it's like, then what? Right? And Aaron writes, as the human condition consists in freedom, in some part, right? A disturbing degree of freedom, and the freedom to realize that no matter what you do, nothing is going to be like, oh, I'm doing the right thing. You understand? Like, you could always say no, because judged from the outside, it's stupid what you're doing. What you're doing is stupid, right? Like, who cares, right? Jason writes, is this why death gives meaning to life? I don't know. I don't know. Maybe not. You could argue that it precisely, I don't know. There's a tension there, Jason. That's worth exploring in an entry, for instance, right? It's worth reflecting about. Yeah. It's not as obvious as that, because if it were that easy, then you could just say, let's just wait and we die. But if you just wait and die, does it give your life meaning? Let's say you just wait and die. If death gives meaning to life, let's just write that as a proposition and examine it for a moment. Death gives meaning to life. Well, as soon as you die, then retroactively it gives meaning, but you weren't really there to enjoy it. And no matter what you do, the fact that you're going to die gives it meaning. Like, it can't be that simple. There's something there about the fact that we end, but it can't kind of give all that meaning in one go. It doesn't work that way. Yeah. Because think about it. If I sit there and I play PlayStation and I eat Doritos chips and I do nothing else with my life, eventually I'll die. Okay. Does that mean that what I did was worthwhile? Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But once I'm dead, I'm not there to enjoy it anyways. Right? And Malika writes, somewhat relates to a poem I read when the poet says that we fancy going to heaven, but why is there life on earth if heaven is the ultimate goal? Yeah, and heaven, according to Beauvoir, you'd be bored there. Because what are you going to do in heaven? Heaven is unlike anything you've ever experienced. You're always unfolding in time and running after something. What would you do in heaven? You'd be bored shitless. You'd be like, hey, I'm in heaven. Then what? Nothing. It'd be the world of no then whats. And there'd be nothing for you to do. And that's not, whatever a heaven is, once you'd be there, you wouldn't be a human anymore. You'd be something else. Because being a human is this, right? You wouldn't have nothing to pursue. You'd be like, I don't know, like a cloud. Like, you'd be there, you'd have no interests, right? It would not be a pleasant thing, because everything that you can have a conversation. Well, what's a conversation with someone, for instance, right? It's like it's unfolding in time. There are surprises. You don't know what they're going to say in advance, right? Conversation is a project. A conversation is a journey. A conversation is the path. If you think you're going to see your grandma in heaven, when you get there, what's going to happen? It's timeless. It's perfect. It doesn't work. Yeah. So lots of big ideas, right? And I want to ask a question. I know Jason's typing a lot, and I'm curious to see what folks have to say. But have you noticed that stylistically the writing's a bit different? Can everyone notice that? The reading is just different. It's more poetic. It's a little more literary. Can you all feel that? Yeah. And Jason writes, I mean, the fact that we're going to die bookends our existence. If we're immortal, then eventually we would have done everything and nothing would have mean anything anymore. When nothing is new, nothing has meaning. That's true. That's true. Right? But it's more than just, I would not say that it's death. Like, let's say, Jason, if I can make a drawing, let's make a little drawing for a moment, right? Let's say this is your life, right? And this is where you were born, and this is when you die. So this is born, right? And this is death. And somewhere in between happens this thing called your life, right? It's not so much that this full black dot, this filled dot is what gives you meaning. It's that this is finite and gives a sense of urgency on how you're going to spend your time. It's not that there's something, let me put it in red here. It's not that there's something special about this thing here. It's not death. It's the finitude of life. The fact that there's a limit. You can't do everything, right? And even if you did, you feel this urge to spend your time well. You have this imperative to, how am I going to spend my time well? But there's no real answer to that. There's no preset answer. Here's how you spend your time well. At any rate, only you can stipulate basically that I'm spending my time well, but stipulation doesn't seem to be enough. Do you see that? This is where we are, right? We started with boxes. This in a box is Beauvoir's philosophical account. I exist as a being with terrifying freedom. How do I know? By total honesty without any self-deception. What should I do? Avoid self-deception and accept ambiguity. What should we do? Well, build a society that lets each person decide their own lives. But notice it all starts with this claim here that you exist as a being with terrifying freedom. The picture that we just saw is not the picture that you experience. This, if you abide by absolute honesty, this is where you find yourself. It's a very different picture. It's a very different picture. And in that picture, you know, right, that anything you do will end. Anything you do will end. Everything ends. This class will end. Movies end. The best fruit ends up rotting and ending. The universe as a whole is going to end. Everything ends. You're going to end. Everything ends. Yet, nevertheless, can you choose, according to Beauvoir, to do nothing? Let's say that displeases you, this thought of nothing, and everything ends. Can you choose to just sit there and say, I reject, I object, I'm going on strike, I'm sitting and doing nothing? Is that a real option, according to Beauvoir? I do nothing. How would that look? Can you do that? Yes or no? No. Why not? That's the correct answer. No, you cannot. Why not? Why is it impossible to do nothing? Choosing not to choose is still a choice. You get bored, and even if you're not bored or not fulfilled, what's going to happen? Either way, like I choose, this is disturbing, let's say. I choose not to. What's going to happen, irrespective of you like it or not? Life will take its course. Yeah, time will go on, right? And what's going to happen? Well, your stomach's going to start grumbling, right? And another mind-independent constraint is going to nudge you forward, but time moves forward, right? You'll be like, I have to eat. What do I do, right? Time is one of those mind-independent boundaries, and it keeps pushing you forward. You can imagine it as this. It's always pushing you forward. It's always pushing you forward. It's always pushing you forward. Act. You have no choice. Act. You have no choice. Act. You have no choice. Yeah, life will find a way. You have no choice, right? Now, I want to just make a quick poll, because I told you this reading, if you understand it correctly, is both liberating and terrifying. Right now, what are you seeing more, the liberating or terrifying? And of course, you know from the class now, right, that the fix to that is what? Hey, you got all your problems fixed by doing this. Take what other Homo sapiens around you say and treat it as if it were true, as if it were real. Problem solved. It's like, hey, man, like other people have said stories, and those stories are reassuring. How about I just take them for granted, right? And I engage in an act of self-deception, and I say everything's figured out. Just have the right hairstyle, eat the right food, and everything's gonna be okay. Just have the right job, 2 kids, 2 cars. Everything's gonna be okay. Everything's gonna be. Will it? Like, that's self-deception, right? And it does bring you some peace, yeah, but at the cost of foregoing your freedom. And who knows, right? Maybe your happiness is over here, right? Maybe your happiest version of yourself is over here waiting to be you, right? Hey, go there. But if you go there, what do you have to do, right? If you choose that destination, you have to choose a destination, but then you have to keep choosing and choosing and choosing with the constant knowledge that you can stop at any time. Even if you do so, time will go on, and you can always choose another destination. You can always decide, oh, I was going here, right? But I can become this person, and I can become that person. And you can become all sorts of persons. There's also versions of you that you could become. And you've got whatever, like, today's the first day of the rest of your life. You got maybe 60 years left. Figure it out. And then you're left there. And that's both terrifying and liberating. So that's what I meant earlier when I was saying that freedom is a good thing, but it's also like this, right? And that's what it means to be a human.